Welcome back to America Right Now. In the wake of the killing of George Floyd, Americans were treated to a near constant refrain from Democrats about supposed widespread indiscriminate killings of black men by white police officers. Those charges were not supported by the facts. Regardless, those claims were buttressed by a message about precipitous rises in white supremacism and systemic racism being a threat to America.
Maybe George Floyd murder was a breaking point. Maybe John Lewis is passing the inspiration. America's ready, in John's words, to lay down, quote, the heavy burden of hate and to end the hard work of rooting out our systemic racism. It isn't just about police reform. It's about dealing with the deep wound of systemic racism in this nation.
It was manufactured outrage. Those messages were also core to the Democrats' efforts to mobilize voters against Donald Trump and Republicans in 2020. Well, it's a new election, and so naturally, a new boogeyman needs to be concocted by the left to scare Americans. This year, Democrats and their massive media ecosystem are raising alarm bells about the danger of so-called Christian nationalism. Dozens of articles have started popping up about this fictional political movement, and that's Democrats' thinly veiled attack on Christianity, the Bible, and America itself. One of the most recent promoters of this conspiracy theory, which is also backed by no practical evidence, is political reporter Heidi Przybyla. A review of her reporting finds, not surprisingly, an almost singular focus on attacking conservatives and Republicans, making her yet another activist masquerading as a Pulitzer-toting journalist. She boasts on her website that her detailed reporting on President Biden's record on abortion pressured the Biden campaign in 2020 to reverse his long-standing opposition for taxpayer funding for the killing of the unborn. Her articles are almost completely devoid of any policy or political critique of the left.
The one thing that unites all of them, because there's many different groups orbiting Trump, but the thing that unites them as Christian nationalists, not Christians, by the way, because Christian nationalists is very different, is that they believe that our rights as Americans, as all human beings, don't come from any earthly authority. They don't come from Congress. They don't come from the Supreme Court. They come from God.
She was forced to apologize this week for those comments. But look, this isn't about the musings of one leftist Beltway reporter. As with anything when it comes to the American left, there's a much larger strategy at play. Attacks on the founders, our founding documents, and people of faith for political gain are part of a broader effort to discredit the American system and America generally. Scare tactics are a key component of any Marxist or socialist movement's playbook. Organizers resort to those tactics because the fundamentals of their philosophies ultimately promote less freedom and more authoritarian control. Key goals of American socialism have included the discrediting of the American founding fathers, smearing of the Constitution, belittling all forms of American culture, and discouraging the teaching of American history, and of course, replacing biblical truth with social religions like transgender or climate cultism. All of these objectives are being advanced by today's Democratic Party. Time and space do not permit expounding on examples here, but if you've been paying any attention at all, or you are intellectually honest at all in your assessment of American society, you see this happening every single day. This attack on Christians and the Revolutionary Era principle core to the American experience that our basic rights come from God, not men, is clearly Marxist in character. Karl Marx once wrote, "One of the most important tasks of the Cultural Revolution affecting wide masses is the task of systematically and unswervingly combating religion." In 1936, the program of the Communist International stated in part that there can be no doubt that the Soviet Union is led by a communist party with, quote, a program permeated by the spirit of militant atheism. Joseph Stalin lamented in his book on Leninism that the clergy had not yet been, quote, completely liquidated from society. It's important to remember that Marxism, which has a strong foothold among today's Democrat socialists, is also founded on the principle that violence is justified to create a new society where the state not God-given rights or individual liberty, is the primary focus. Marx, who was a penniless degenerate, even sacrificed the well-being and the lives of his own children for his revolutionary designs, believed that prevailing morals would doom the effort to upend the social and political order. His objective, therefore, was to eliminate those morals and Judeo-Christian values. Thomas Jefferson made clear in the Declaration of Independence that this would be a nation grounded on the belief that there is something higher than man's authority. It was the justification for the separation from the King of England. While the American Academy, dominated by left-wing thinkers, has tried to put distance between God or biblical inspiration and our founding fathers, the truth is they leaned very heavily on the divine and divine guiding truths to validate and secure American liberty. John Adams, who once wrote that the Constitution was made for a, quote, moral and religious people, fully understood that the fabric of society is not knitted together by men, as Marx would later profess, but by God to secure our rights. The cavalcade of writers who will use Christian nationalism as a cudgel against Republicans and Trump supporters this year intentionally ignore that America is not a Christian nation. It is a moral one. And those morals stem from the Bible, which provided the foundation for Western society. The framers had ample opportunity, folks, to include reference to Christianity in the Constitution. They chose not to do that, despite the vast majority of them being believing Christians. Additionally, Christianity is at its core inclusive rather than Marxism, which is ultimately exclusive. Christian principles do not tolerate dictatorship. The Democrat message machine is just getting warmed up, folks, on this, and it will likely include broadside attacks on a host of Christian values, like the radical idea that there are only two genders, marriage, life, parental rights. They're going to throw in racism in there somewhere, too, to be sure. As this nonsensical assault continues, Americans should remember Ben Franklin's admonition that, quote, "We have been assured in the sacred writings that unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain, those who build it."